Utah stole its first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, it's great to have you, Genies. Boy, we've got a bunch of guests going on today. We've got Kimberly Morgan here. This is a woman who has had, shall we say, mysterious experiences and discovered a tombstone in the woods on a former Southern plantation on a military base. You're going to want to hear what all of that turned into. Plus, we're going to talk to Shelby Drake. She's with Legacy Tree Genealogist, just 24 years old, started researching at 15, recently found a 109-year-old great aunt, still living, got her to do a DNA test. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Shelby. And then later in the show, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the eBay challenge to try to get you to go out and find things related to your ancestors on eBay. And Robert Warren, an Alaska resident, has checked in, and he made a great discovery. You're going to hear all about it later in the show. Hey, if you haven't signed up yet for our weekly Genie newsletter, it's about time you did it at ExtremeGenes.com or on our Facebook page. You'll get a blog from me each week, a couple of links to past and present shows, and of course links to news stories you're going to find fascinating as a genealogist. Right now, let's check in with Boston. David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David. How you doing?
Hey, I'm on vacation. I'm doing really well. I'm going to do more genealogy.
Yes.
And I can also do stranger things with my family photos, thanks to Deep Nostalgia Part 2, or I like to call it Deeper Nostalgia, by MyHeritage. Now my ancestors can blow me kisses.
Yes, I saw all this.
Passion. How did your photos turn out?
I'm going to be honest, a little weird, but I can see where it might be fun for some people. And I haven't run, male and female through, or more recent relatives compared to the really old ones. I think for some that were way, way back, you look at it and go, I doubt that they would have looked like that, blowing a kiss or giving a wink. But
you
maybe
need to find a grumpy ancestor photo and have them blow a kiss.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I will say this, though, regardless, it's a lot of fun to play with and see if something makes sense, and you can keep the various ones that you like and maybe try it on something else. But again, I love what they've done. Certainly the first round. The second one is a little more entertaining and not as realistic, but a lot of fun from MyHeritage, and you just go to their page and you can find it under Family Tree, under New.
The AI technology they're doing with it. It's great stuff.
It is.
Well, technology is what's responsible for the next story I want to talk about. At the Battle of Leyte Gulf in World War II, 77 years ago, there was a vessel called the Uss Johnston. Well, the Uss Johnston slipped beneath the waves 20,000 feet into the ocean, and it is now determined as the deepest shipwreck ever found.
Wow.
They found it, Fish. A dear friend of mine in my hometown, his mother was pregnant at the time when her husband-to-be passed away on the vessel.
Oh, my gosh.
Never came home.
So this is really personal to him. And to give it a little perspective, 20,000 feet is 8,000 feet deeper than the Titanic.
Than the Titanic, exactly.
Amazing.
And that's 2.5 miles down, so doing a little bit of the math there. So it won't be a vessel that will ever be raised, I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
But it's very sad.
I had an uncle who was actually in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. And so this was, those Pacific battles were nasty.
Well, I'll tell you, World War II stories I just love. And the next one is about a fellow named Nicholas DeVoe, and he lives out in St. Lucia. And his father was in the Royal Air Force in World War II and kept a logbook of all his flights. He read a story about a Japanese pilot who had actually been one of the ones that had attacked Pearl Harbor. And he sent the book to get the person to autograph it. He figured because now this pilot had embraced peace post-war. Well, the pilot had died by the time he got the book out to Japan. But that hasn't stopped him to get other pilots in World War II, and he has over 100 signatures in it, and it's traveled around the world. He's now got people filming as the signatures are occurring, but what a nice memento as we have the twilight years of World War II veterans upon us.
Wow. And he's getting them from all the different countries, all combatant countries. Amazing.
All right. All pilots, in fact. So it's quite amazing. I love when I find a story that kind of mixes fiction with history. And, of course, we've always heard of Atlantis. And, I still remember the Man from Atlantis, the TV show with Patrick Duffy years ago.
Right.
And, this next story has a connection with work. We have a portrait of Rebecca Rawson at NEHGS, and she perished in 1692 on the island of Jamaica in the port of Port Royal. Now, that may mean nothing. You think she could have just died from disease? No. Port Royal had an earthquake, and many people died. The earth underneath the port basically liquefied, and then tsunamis came in and destroyed most of what was there. But it's an interesting port, Fish, because your ancestor may have been there. He was a pirate, right?
Yeah.
This was basically Pirate Central. Privateers and buccaneers of the 17th century were at Port Royal quite a bit. And so your ancestor, I think he may be in the news again. Yeah.
In fact, Jim Bailey, who I've had on the show before, is going to be on next week, and we're going to talk about this more. But the story of the crew of Henry Every coming back to North America after their plundering days were done and they were being pursued by the King of England and the Royal Navy. It was the first worldwide manhunt. Yeah, the story's gone international now. It is all over the place. You can look it up online. But we're going to have Jim on to talk about that, how he made the discovery of this tiny little coin, about the third the size of a dime, and how it turned into this amazing research that has essentially rewritten the final chapter of this pirate story. So it's a lot of fun because one of my ancestors was a crewman on this ship.
I'm going to have to meet up with Jim because the best I ever found with my metal detector was a couple of quarters and some pull tabs. Well, that's about all I have from Beantown this week. But remember, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you could save $20 with the coupon code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org.
All right, David, thank you. And we'll talk to you again at the back end of the show for Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Kimberly Morgan. She has had, shall we say, interesting experiences. It's coming up next in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. Well, Genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Well, anybody who's been in genealogy for any time at all is familiar with the term serendipity, those weird things that happen when you're researching your dead. And we have another case of it here. It took place a while back, and yet it is something that has kind of shaped the genealogical career of Kim Morgan, a genealogist for Finding Your Roots on PBS. And Kim is on the show. And Kim, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I'm thinking back now, how many years ago was this?
2004, so about 17 years ago now.
17 years ago, and you were on some military base? Tell the story.
Correct. I live in South Carolina near a military base, and I grew up in this area. And at the time, I was dating a gentleman. He's not my husband now, but we were dating, and he had just returned from a deployment. And I would go over to the base to pick him up so we could go out to dinner or whatever. And when I would park at the barracks he lived at, I would have to park my car and walk past a wooded area to get to the door of his building to knock on the door.
Okay.
And because of my work schedule at the time, I was a 911 dispatcher. We often ended up going out at night. So I would be walking by the woods at night. And the woods were to my right as I walked up to the building. And more than once as I walked past the woods, I felt like someone was watching me. And it was an uncomfortable feeling. It wasn't a malicious feeling. It was a very intense, uncomfortable feeling. Got to the point where I would put my right hand up to the side of my face so I couldn't see out of my peripheral vision the woods, the wood line.
Yeah.
And one night when I was walking by the woods, I will swear to you that out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black man, a black woman, and a young child at the woods line. And they were sad looking. They just looked lost. And they were wearing clothing from the late 1800s. And the little boy was about 7 or 8 years old. And he was kind of like hugged up on his mother's leg. And I can still see that image vividly in my mind, even today. It was just a flash, a quick flash of the corner of my eye. And I just remember I just started running. And I beat on the door. And my boyfriend at the time came to the door. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I told him. And he was like, "You're crazy. Like, you're imagining it. There's no people in the woods. There's nobody watching you. And I'll prove to you. Tomorrow we'll get a machete and we'll go back in the woods. And I'll show you that the only thing back there is wildlife. And there's a creek back there, and that's it." So the next day he got a machete and we put on some boots because the woods were quite thick. You couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. And he started hacking a path into the woods straight back. And about couple 100 yards into the tree line, we came across an old dirty tombstone all by itself in the middle of the woods. Having grown up in a military town, my father was in the Marine Corps. There's a national cemetery in my town, so I'm very familiar with what military tombstones look like.
Sure.
I instantly recognized it as a military tombstone. It said Stephen Benyard, USCT. And I knew, again, from growing up in this area and being a history buff, that USCT meant United States Colored Troops.
Colored Troops, yes.
And it was dingy and it was, full of moss and mold. And it was by itself. There were no other stones around it. And I was just like, why is this man buried here in the middle of the woods on a military base by himself when there's a national cemetery down the street in town? So that's what ignited, that's what sparked my interest into, I'm going to find out who this person is. That's the moment my genealogy career started.
Right there. And did you ever find any other stones in the woods?
So I found out several years later that he is buried within a community cemetery called Edgerly Plantation Cemetery. And there are multiple other people buried there, at least 15. They just don't have existing tombstones or grave markers anymore. But I did get confirmation that 2 of the people buried with him are his wife, Jane, and his 8-year-old son, Timothy.
Oh, wow. Oh, correct. Wow. Yeah. So what became of this? Because I know it's kind of consumed you over the years, and you made some contacts with actual descendants.
I did. Like I said, at the time, in 2004, I was working as a 911 dispatcher, and I'm still friends with my partner, Norma, from dispatch. And she and I joked now. She's like, I remember when you used to bring in that sad little binder, and you would just sit there and be like, obsessed with finding anything you could about this man. And I didn't know how to conduct genealogical research. And it was a process. I left no stone unturned, and I taught myself along the way. In 2013, my husband and I returned from Japan. We lived in Japan for 4 years, and my husband deployed to Iraq. And I was alone, and I couldn't sleep a lot at night, so I started heavily researching Stephen again. And one night in December 2013, I found a message that had been posted on the Ancestry.com message board from someone named Uss. She posted looking for information on the Binyard family of Beaufort, specifically Stephen Binyard. And I messaged this person back, and I said, you know, it's going to sound crazy, but I found this tombstone in the woods, and I think it might be the person you're looking for. And very quickly, I got a response back from Akosawa Moore, and she lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And she said, oh my gosh, that's my great-great uncle. His sister was my great-great-grandmother, and I've been researching him since 2004. And can I call you? We spoke on the phone, and it was just an instant connection.
Wow.
She came down to Beaufort a few weeks later, stayed with me. She, her mother, and her children. And I took them out to the grave, showed them all of my research, and we became very quick friends and research partners. And to this day, she's the sister I never had. Her daughters are the sisters that my daughter will never have. And our families are very close, and we've continued this research together since January 2014 is when we met. So a little over 7 years now that we've been friends, and research has a tendency to snowball.
Yes, yeah, it does. That's right. In fact, it's leading up to this opportunity for your story to be shared with the public.
Correct. As I said, Stephen's buried within a cemetery called Edgerly Plantation, and Stephen was born around 1840, and he was born into slavery at a place called Edgerly Plantation that was here in Beaufort. And of course, when I began to piece together the genealogies of many of the other families that were on Edgerly Plantation with Stephen, it started off with people that he was related to, or his parents were related to, or his wife Jane was related to, and then it just kept snowballing. We began to give presentations about Stephen Binyard and our story to literally anyone who would give us a microphone and a platform. Let us talk about it. Libraries, groups, we would write about it. And eventually we caught the attention of the leadership at the International African American Museum, which is being built in Charleston. It's to open next year, 2022. And the museum will feature a Center for Family History so that people with African-American ancestry can go and conduct genealogical research. And the Center for Family History will have a number of exhibits. And one of the exhibits with a lifetime installation will be Akosawa and I's story of how we met, who Stephen Binyard is, who Stephen's sister Dorcas is, and what's come about from our partnership and our friendship, and how that's pushed the research forward.
That's incredible. I guess I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, have you ever had any other experience where you've actually seen somebody?
Yes. When I was about 10 years old, my great-grandfather in Mississippi had passed away, and we went to my great-grandparents' house in Macomb, Mississippi to visit my great-grandmother, and I slept in a bed in the living room. I remember thinking that was weird. I woke up in the middle of the night, and my great-grandfather was standing next to my bed. And again, I could see in my mind exactly what he was wearing: striped shirt, navy blue slacks. And he was smiling, and he had his hand reaching out to me. And I blinked, and he was gone. The next morning, I told my great-grandmother, who's the most down-to-earth, normal, rational person you can meet. And she just smiled and she said, oh, he loves you. He wouldn't hurt you. And I said, I wasn't scared. And she said, well, that's what he was wearing right before he passed. And you're sleeping in the bed that he had passed away in. It was like hospice. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so I saw my great-grandpa. His name was Simon. And there's been a couple of other little things I've heard that I can't really explain. I go and see Stephen every month and put flowers out and just sort of like make sure that the grave is cleaned up and, neat. And there's a couple of other cemeteries that I do that with. I go around and I just call it making my rounds. And one morning I went out and I was putting flowers on a grave and I distinctly heard over my shoulder a deep male voice say, well, good morning. Nice to see you. And I turned around thinking somebody was there and there was nobody. Nobody was around.
Oh boy. You're one of those people with those unusual gifts. The
creepy, yeah. I've been called the Tombstone Whisperer by the local newspaper, which is kind of funny. But it's just there. I think that the ancestors are with us. And I talk to them. I will freely admit that I talk to them just out loud, and if you happen to see any of the videos, Finding Your Roots has a Facebook page, and I've done a few videos for them, like question and answer type sessions. If you look at the videos, you will see to my side photos, and those photos are the ancestors, because I always try to include them as much as I can, because this is their journey as much as it is mine. So in those videos, you can see the photos. Everybody always asks, well, who are those Black people you have in the photos next to you in the videos? And they're the ancestors. They're the people that I've been researching. It just happened to be that I fell into specializing in African-American genealogy because Stephen Binyard was a Black man. So that's just how it happened. So I try to include them in as much as I can through little videos so that everybody can see their faces and maybe hopefully one day through things like this, know their names.
She's Kim Morgan. She's a genealogist and researcher for Finding Your Roots on PBS. And Kim has unusual things happen to her in her research, and maybe you do too. It's not uncommon. It happens to a lot of people, doesn't it, Kim?
It does.
Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's incredible.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me talk about this.
And coming up next, have you ever had a 109-year-old relative agree to give you a DNA test? Our next guest did. Wait till you hear the story. It's coming up in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. We're back at it on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And my next guest is a Germanic specialist over at our sponsors, Legacy Tree Genealogist. Her name is Shelby Drake. And Shelby, you got started in genealogy at 15 years old. And look at this. You're a 9-year veteran and a Germanic specialist for a major research company at only 24 years old. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, but it's been awesome. I have loved every minute of it. And the story I have to tell you about today is my great-great-grandmother, and it's all her fault. I'm kind of here, genealogy.
Well, what's the issue with your great-great-grandmother?
Well, with her, we couldn't figure out who her parents were. She's one of those ghost people.
Yeah.
We called her a ghost because it just seems like she was spawned on the earth one day.
Yeah, but wait a minute. You were 15 years old. How in the world did you take an interest in this at that age?
I have 5 older siblings, and about 3 of them were very involved in trying to figure out who her parents were, Annie Rice. And there's a picture in our basement. We have 2 of them of her that I have just grown up with, and just the way she looks at you in one of them, I was like, I'm going to figure out who you are and where you came from.
Right.
And who your parents were. And so I remember very vividly going down to the Family History Center when I was 15 and just being so frustrated. I couldn't figure out who her parents were because the records were not cooperating. And the guy walked up to me and he was like, you've been here a couple weeks. just researching. Do you want to maybe volunteer? And that's how I just kind of got into all of this.
Wow. Well, what a fascinating story. And the thing that's interesting about this is you didn't quite achieve your goal with that, as I understand, but you discovered something unique about your grandfather.
Yes. So flash forward 4 years, I would have been 20 at this point. Roots Tech happened in 2016, and my sister and I decided to take an ancestor DNA test. And then we got my mother to take one as well. My mother's maiden name is Miller, so you'd expect to find a million Miller matches.
Yes.
And we had none.
Oh, wow.
Not a single one. And so we're sitting there going, oh no, we need to have a very awkward conversation with our mother because her grandfather is not her grandfather. So we go and talk to her, and she tells us, oh yeah, I remember he told me when he was really little, he remembered sitting in front of a judge and the judge going, do you want this man to be your father? And we're like, okay, everything's good. There's not some awkward story we need to uncover.
So she was talking about her own father then.
Yeah, her own father.
Yeah.
So his name was James Figurjic Miller. Everybody called him Jim. And so we're sitting there going, okay, that's great. We know that this wasn't some weird family story, but now who's his father?
Yeah, that's quite an issue here. And you're just 20 years old. And of course, at this point, the whole wave of genetic genealogy has hit. Had you ever done a genetic genealogy case at that point?
I had not. I was still very new. I had gotten my acceptance letter into BYU to join their family history program there, but I had yet to go to BYU when all of this was happening.
Wow.
And so I was very new. My sister had a bit more experience than I did, and we just started this whole journey of, okay, who's Annie Rice's parents? Who are her grandson's parents? And we just dived in.
Right. So were you able to actually zero in on who your great-grandparents were?
We did. So we had this one match that made no sense. She was a second cousin to my mother. So we're sitting there like, who are you? And so we go and we talk to this individual who I will call Living M. And Living M, we built out her tree after talking with her. And there were some surnames we recognized. And this was a problem because that surname was DeWeese. So my great-grandmother was a woman by the name of Irene Franklin, so Annie Rice's daughter. And her sister Helen married a man named L. DeWeese.
Uh-oh.
So yes, we're sitting there thinking, the surnames match. This could not be very good. The problem was no descendants of L. DeWeese had taken a DNA test. But we had Albert, so the brother of L, his descendants had. And we only shared about 291 centimorgans with that descendant. And so then I'm thinking, okay, that's where we need to go and find a descendant of L. DeWeese to take a DNA test so we can figure out who is the biological father of my grandfather. And so we did that, and that individual ended up sharing 665 centimorgans of DNA, which is a measurement of how much DNA you share with somebody. Yep. And it was obvious. Oh, yes, L. DeWeese was the biological father of my grandfather. Now, the problem was L. DeWeese was 27. My great-grandmother's sister, Helen, was 7 months pregnant at the time. My grandfather would have been conceived. And the other issue was my grandma was 14, my great-grandma.
Ooh.
So she got sent off to an unwed mother's home run by the Salvation Army in St. Louis, where at the age of 15, she gave birth to my grandfather. And she made the courageous choice to keep her baby in a time that wasn't very popular in 1929.
Incredible. And then you went on and you found out that you had, shall we say, a rather aged aunt. Now, which side was this on? This is the sister of your grandfather's mother, is that right?
Yes. So we have Helen, who was the sister that was married to L. DeWeese. And then we have my great-grandma, who was Irene Franklin, who was my grandfather's mother. And then we have Lucille Franklin. She was born in 1908. So in this whole process, my sister is messaging tons of people to figure out if anybody knows anything. And they knew just about as much as we did, or even less in most cases. So we get this message one day from one of our, I think she was a third cousin, And she tells us, oh, yeah, I remember my mom talking about Bertha, which was a sister of Irene, Aunt Helen, and Lucille, and some other siblings. And she also talked about Lucille, who was 107 and living in St. Louis.
What?
And she put that little bit in parentheses as an afterthought and just didn't elaborate on it at all. Sure enough, we Googled Lucille Ham, because that was her married name, St. Louis, and she popped right up, except this cousin was wrong about her age. She's actually 109.
Oh, wow.
Yes. We thought she was dead. We'd put her as dead in every single tree we had, because who lives that long?
Sure, right.
No one in our family tree had lived over the age of 100 that we knew of, except for her. And so Annie Rice, who was born in 1876, daughter, who was born in 1908, was still alive.
That's insane. So what did you do with this?
We immediately started researching if she had any relatives that were living. And she had a granddaughter, and we got in touch with the granddaughter and started talking back and forth. And it was just this serendipitous, amazing moment, because the granddaughter had all the information we had been searching for forever about Annie Rice's parents. She knew who they were. She had names and dates. And since we did get in touch with her granddaughter, we had all that information.
Yeah, and you did a DNA test, too.
We did. So this proves that any age can take a DNA test. Lucy took a DNA test for us at the age of 109. She passed away, sadly, in August of 2018 at the age of 110.
No, that's not sad. That's incredible. A celebration there. 110. That's fantastic. Well, Shelby, thank you so much for this. This is a great story. What a journey. And congratulations on getting started in all this so young, because you're going to benefit from that throughout your entire life. And now you're a Germanic specialist at Legacy Tree, and you obviously know your stuff. So congratulations, and look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Oh, thank you so much.
And coming up next, we offered the eBay challenge a couple of weeks ago, and one of our listeners is checking in with another great find. You'll hear it coming up in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration, or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, Genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our Genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Well, it wasn't all that long ago, just a few weeks ago, that David Allen Lambert and I came on and challenged everybody to check out eBay. It was the eBay challenge to find out what you could find related to your ancestors there. And I heard from Robert Warren. And Robert, where are you located, by the way?
In Palmer, Alaska.
Alaska. Wow. And you went on eBay. And what did you find taking this challenge?
Well, to lay the foundation, my third great-grandfather was born and raised in Denmark and fought in the First Schleswig War between the years of 1848 to 1850. And as part of that, he received 2 medals. One was a Dannebrog Cross for bravery, and another was a commemorative medal that was given to all those who participated in the war. And so I had seen pictures of it on Family Search. Someone has those medals in a frame. And I'm not sure if they're still with a family member or possibly even in a museum. But at any rate, I thought that would be really neat to have even just a copy of one of those medals. And so I went onto eBay, and sure enough, there was one of those commemorative medals. And unfortunately, the ribbon was gone from the medal, and the clasp had been broken off. I don't know if it was unintentionally or intentionally to make it have the appearance of a coin. The medal itself is between the size of a quarter and a 50-cent piece. So there it was, and it was only $18.
$18. Wow. Yeah, well, that's
18.
the thing, too. So many of these things are so inexpensive. What are you going to do with it now?
Well, you know what? Right now it's sitting on my genealogy table, a bunch of other things that I need to figure out how to curate. And so a tip that was given to me was maybe that I should take a photo that I have of my third great-grandfather with his medals and put that with the medal and frame it. And possibly even a little clip about the story of the medal so that it means something to somebody besides going through and saying, oh, here's a cool little coin-looking thing, but it's probably not worth anything. And then it ends up out in a dumpster somewhere. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And I had a similar thing with a bunch of little trinkets that came from my mother, and she was in this big marching band in Oregon when she was in high school. So every year they gave them a little medallion, and I had them in a little cardboard box. And I figured, well, these are just going to go away when I'm gone because nobody knows what they are, what they mean, unless you look at them closely. And so I did just that. I took a photograph of my mother in her marching band and another smaller one of her alone with her clarinet in her uniform, and then framed this all with these medallions and a little explanation of what they were. And that way it gives them all context and they all kind of stay together. But I always have felt that there's different levels of discovery on eBay, and this is one of those levels, and that is finding something related to your ancestor. As you say, this is not his medal, but it's the exact same medal he received. And when you can't get somebody's individual medal, to find one identical to it, that's a great find.
Oh, it's a great find. And I think that you had spoke of this at one time or several times during your show about a medal, I believe, that your grandfather had received as a firefighter in New York.
Yeah, there were a bunch of ribbons they were given as they were hosted by other fire companies as they crossed the country in 1887 from New York to San Francisco, and they'd parade in all the major cities, and they would exchange these ribbons. Now, I don't have any of the ribbons that he received, but I found 3 ribbons on eBay that were all from that same trip, one of them with the initials of one of the fellow firemen on the trip. So I have them framed in my office on the wall because I think they're a real treasure. Well, Robert, thanks so much for sharing your story, and congratulations on it. And I think the eBay challenge is really worth anybody's while to try. You can't lose.
Absolutely. You can't lose. But even if you can't have the exact one, and oftentimes because, another family member might possess it, and there's only so many of one metal to go around.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to have one in possession.
Thrilled to hear the story. Thanks so much, Robert. Have a good one. And coming up next, David Allen Lambert and I will do another session of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. This is our final segment of Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Ask Us Anything. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth on Extreme Genes with David Allen Lambert, back from the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. And David, we have an email here from Rick Mitchell from Nashville, Tennessee. And Rick says, guys, my grandfather had a cousin who I understand was in Alcatraz by the name of Loyal McCready. Wow.
Great name. That's a great name.
It is a great name. Where might I find a photo of him or a prison record? Better yet. Thanks, Rick. Good question, Dave.
Ooh, well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I kind of bumped around with Alcatraz stuff. I have actually a friend who's one of the last prisoners from Alcatraz, Bob Shiblin, down in Florida. He's almost 90 years old. Well, anyways, that's a story for another day. You can find Alcatraz inmate lists from the National Archives at San Francisco on www.archives.gov/San-Francisco, and they're finding aids. And you can find out that record group 129 holds all the records, essentially over 540 cubic feet. Now, this is administrative records, equipment material, but more important, the warden's notebooks and all of the black and white photos of prisoner identification, including inmate files. Now, let's take a peek at the database here because it actually lists everybody. So let's see our McCready. Is he in here? And yep, there he is. His name is Loyal Dean McCready, and his inmate number is 612. So he must have been in Alcatraz pretty early.
Wow, yeah.
In the 30s or early 40s with a number like that. So he probably knew Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, and everything.
Or Burt Lancaster.
Or Burt Lancaster.
Yes.
Or maybe even Bob Shiblin, depending how long he was there. No, the bulk of these records go from 1934 to 1963 when they closed Alcatraz. And it's funny about Alcatraz, and Bob told me an interesting story. He had already been in prison. And if you screw up in a regular prison, you're sent to Alcatraz. So basically, if you're a rabble-rouser or you try to break out or escape from another prison, you are sent to Alcatraz, which, of course, we know maybe it wasn't successful, but there were people who did escape, apparently two, from history's point of view. So if you want to learn more about that, the National Archives has this finding guide. And you just have to keep in mind that they are restricted, even under the Freedom of Information Act, provisions to keep the privacy of living people. So I couldn't order Bob's record without his permission. But because of the number for your cousin Loyal there, chances are you may be able to put in for a request. And if you do, let us know. Love to see what his mugshot looks like with nostalgia.
It's funny, too, that you bring this up because I had a half first cousin once removed who I'd never met before drop by this past week. And she was a delight. We had a great visit, and her dad is a first cousin to me, a half first cousin to me. And she was talking about her grandmother, who was my mom's half sister. And it turns out that the first husband was in San Quentin. So we went online and looked it up, and sure enough, there's his mugshot. Never seen a picture of the guy before, but he got in trouble back in the 1920s, and he was in there for 2 years. So, yeah, that's a great resource, and what a great question. So thank you so much, Rick, for asking that. David, thank you so much for coming on, and we will chat at you again next week. Have a good one. That is our show for this week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to our guests, by the way. Wow, what great stories this week. Kimberly Morgan, of course, talking about the strange sightings and the discovery of the tombstone and what it's all led to. Shelby Drake from Legacy Tree Genealogist talking about that 109-year-old great aunt who's still around to give a DNA test and all the things she's discovered there, and Robert Warren for telling us about his great success with the eBay challenge. If you missed any of it, catch it on iTunes, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, TuneIn Radio, or Spotify. Talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us, and remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.